started. Today's topic is the future of personalized content management, insights from the experts. And I'm very happy to introduce you to our experts. Gurdeep Dhillon, CMO at Contentstack, and our guest, Chuck Gahun, Principal Analyst at Forrester. And then I will jump into our agenda for today. So we'll start with the trends in the CMS market, visual building, personalization, the role of generative AI, looking ahead, and then we'll get into our Q&A portion. And now I'd love to hand this off to Gurdeep.
All right. Hey, everybody. I saw in the chat that it was maybe the audio wasn't coming through, but I think it might have been an isolated issue. So we're going to keep going. Thanks, Alex, for the intro. Awesome. Good, Anna. I'm glad. Hey, Chuck, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm in rainy London for we had our ContentCon Europe event yesterday. Where are you? You home in Washington?
I'm home in Washington, D.C. Indeed, it's a rainy day here in D.C.
Oh, it is? All right. Not alone then. Hey, thanks for joining us. I'm excited for this one. And I think we got some good content to take the team through. I know you put some pre-work in and you've been doing a lot of research, obviously, on the CMS space. I was thinking a good place to start would be for you to take us through, like, what's top of mind for you from the perspective of trends that you're seeing in the CMS space, and then maybe we can go from there into a deep dive on a couple topics.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we think about trends in the CMS market, keep in mind that, Forrester's role, we're talking to a bunch of businesses that are asking questions about how CMSs can help move their businesses and their customer experiences, digital experiences to the next level, right? So a lot of what you're about to see is baked in our research and speaking with them, but is also baked in some of the trends that we're seeing across not only the vendor landscape, but also some of the adjacent systems that support the CMS ecosystem. So where is the CMS market as a whole going is what I'll cover in the next couple of slides.
Cool.
Just to start out, I would say we did the wave evaluation on CMS last year, and coming out of that from a customer references feedback as part of the wave process, it was pretty clear that brand consistency and brand awareness in market was the number one driver as to why people are buying and implementing, or maybe even re-implementing CMSs today. Time to market, site consolidation, customer acquisition were all in play as well, but brand consistency across a multitude of geographies was really what brands were concerned about, and leaders that we spoke to were concerned about. As part of that, naturally, we looked at the difference between pure headless solutions and hybrid solutions. Where is the market? And our research revealed that across 35 vendors in the CMS landscape, we're in one of two categories. You're either pure headless CMS at this point, or you are a hybrid CMS, which has server-side rendering and pure headless capabilities. So you're in one of two camps. All CMSs across 35 vendors that we looked at have headless capabilities at some level of fidelity. So that's the good news. I think headless as a capability has taken on in the CMS space. It's not so much a trend anymore. It's much more a core capability of CMSs. As we look at the various, and I'm going to try to see if I can advance this, but it's not. Maybe Alex, you could advance it for. There we go. Wait, let me go back one. So one of the pieces of parts of the research was also surrounding, what are the digital touch points your CMS is serving? We talked a lot about headless going to multiple endpoints, more than desktop and mobile. And there was a very few percentage of the folks we spoke to that were using it for screen displays or watches even. It's largely desktop and mobile. That's where headless capabilities or CMS capabilities are being rendered on the front end for digital experiences. So I'm sharing this just to ground us in where CMSs have come from in the headless storyline, and now talk a little bit more about what I think we're going to cover on this webinar over the next 45, 55 minutes or so, which is like, what are the major capabilities of CMSs that are evolving to take us to the next level, right? So 4 major trends in 2024 that I'm seeing across the content management system landscape. Number one, individualized experiences. So the storyline here has to do with the fact that, remember, generative AI's role is to look at large swaths of data and try to make sense of it. As processing power is increasing, as we have the ability to look at some of those segments, but more importantly, even look at customer data, whether it's in your CRM or in your CDP, we're gaining faster and better processing power and software applications that are much smarter. And we're starting to evolve into this world of thinking a little bit beyond just customer segments and thinking more about what individualized experiences look like. I know that, software vendors I'm speaking to, and certainly you guys at Contentstack, you're putting a lot of effort into sort of the personalization side of things. And as we see those capabilities evolve over time, individualized experiences are a storyline and a red thread that's coming about. I'll just run through these, Gurdeep, and then if you want to sort of prompt or have any questions, we can always dive in. Enhanced content authoring. So this is about visual builders, low-code tools, turnkey integrators to adjacent systems. All of those things are in place. So we're also getting to a point where we're trying to make content authoring as simple as possible. And we understand that the enterprise stack isn't just the CMS. We've got digital asset management, we've got product information management, e-com, CRM, CDP. These are complex ecosystems of enterprise technologies. And as part of that, CMS being the central orchestrator of digital experiences, which is what customers told us over and over again, that part of it, we're working hard to get the authoring interfaces to be as seamless as possible, especially as we have younger and younger generation of marketers come in and they're looking for much more of the sort of just the UIs that they are so used to and are so intuitive, rather than looking at large content models and libraries. Next gen engagement tools. So this is about variant generation. We've talked a lot about A/B experimentation. That's been in market for, I would say, over a decade at this point. That being said, how are we going to enable marketers to have always on experimentation? How are we going to have Gen AI support that story to bring the next level of engagement in for marketers today? So that's a little bit about next gen engagement tools. And then finally, Gen AI native marketing studios are coming about. I've seen it in pockets in market. This is definitely one of the trends that is coming about. It's not fully, I would say, the fidelity is not fully rationalized in market as yet, but I will say that this has a very powerful capability. And the idea here is that all the way from creative processes to content editing, creation, all the way down to actual engagement, how can we create an end-to-end loop for a marketer that is Gen AI powered, so that the machine is doing the heavy lifting of thinking through where content engagement is happening, and then bringing it back to the marketer to help them help them create more creative assets that make sense, more copy that makes sense, even maybe more targeted messaging that makes sense. So that's a little bit of what the Gen AI native marketing studio is all about. And of course, all of these capabilities are powered by, large language models, and over time, that's only going to evolve more and more. Anyway, I said a lot.
That makes sense.
But
that makes sense. I think the follow-up question would be, how does this relate to how customers are prioritizing or placing value on certain features in the CMS? Have you done any research on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we asked, if you're looking at this slide, this is a very interesting one, because we looked at the major capabilities of the CMS, whether it's content authoring, whether it's aggregating and creating the experience or the marketing campaign, whether it's actually delivering it through headless or server-side rendering, or it's personalization. And when we ask them these questions, resoundingly, the feedback has been authoring and modeling and actually aggregating and creating the assemblers. Like, we need to do more there, ask our vendor partners to deliver more capabilities. That's what we use day in and day out. On the right side, as much as we talk about headless, the feedback was, once implemented and once they have sort of solved that pain point, it works. It's not something that they think about day in and day out. And then content personalization was really the one that was the rub, honestly, in these customer reference calls last year, which was they didn't understand they believed that their vendor had the capabilities to deliver content personalization. They weren't questioning the software's capabilities. But in order to make it work with their content and their data, for them, it always felt like a phase 3 project. It felt like something that required a ton of money. And their feedback to me was, hey, Forrester, can you please tell the vendor community and the services community to make the personalization side easier for us, because we want to give our customers more, but it's just so challenging.
Yeah, that resonates. That resonates so strongly. Yeah, I mean, like, our takeaway on that one is that personalization is basically it's the sexiest thing that no one's doing, right? My friend Robert Rose likes to say that a lot. It's been overwhelming, and I think we'll go into more detail on that today. But what we're seeing is it's hard to be a brand right now. It's hard because there's so much noise. We are living in a digital first world. In many cases, it's a digital only world. And that's just creating a ton of noise. And it's so hard to be relevant with our audience, whether it's our customers, prospective customers, partners. It's a challenge right now. And so we're calling this the brand relevancy crisis. And relevancy is really the key word here. In order to have a sustainable competitive advantage, your stat around brand and awareness being the number one driver of the move to a modern CMS, that's exactly what we're trying to say here is, if you're not relevant, if you're not top of mind to your audience, you're not going to be in the consideration set, whether you're B2B or B2C. So that totally resonates. I think for us, we are actively trying to solve for the gaps that have existed, to open up our customers' minds to the possibility that these things are now possible. So I think that's a good segue, actually, as we talk about content operations and the trends that you showed. I'm actually curious. Out of the four, are there any that jump out? And I know I'm probably leading the witness here with the slide that I pulled up, but any trends that jump out to you that you would say give organizations and specifically business users a competitive edge when it comes to content operations? Because that's a topic that comes up a lot for us with customers.
Yeah, the two in the middle on that slide I've shared between next gen.
I'm gonna go back to it.
Yeah, it's either the next gen engagement tools around the customer journey or the enhanced content authoring. And what we're seeing in market is that there's a gravitation more so towards visual builders and low-code tools in the interfaces for content authoring. And let me tell you a little bit about why that's happening as we start talking about what visual building is. And maybe, Gurdeep, you can ground the team in what visual builders are. I can maybe give a little bit of the backstory first, which is we're getting to a point where we're evolving these content authoring interfaces as we have moved CMSs from these brand or catalog sites to then being much more demand generators, and to now being much more in content engagement centric. And so I think you can see, as you see the evolution of a software category that goes through those various phases, similarly, when you're authoring content on a brand or catalog site, it felt a little bit more like one and done, put it up, people will come to it, we'll maybe drive some digital marketing to it, to then becoming, no, this is a demand gen centric, this is driving value ROI for our business. We need to do more and more of that, which is where we started to enter really the era of integrations and APIs and low-code tooling, to now where we're going, which is we want an always-on experimentation toolkit that is going to keep driving our marketing function, that is Gen AI enabled, that is adding value. And guess what? For that, we need tools like visual builders, as I mentioned earlier, or younger audiences coming into the marketing space that are editing, managing content. They want drag and drop interfaces. They want to just look at what they are building, be able to preview it and launch it. And to do those things, that's sort of like the rise of visual building as we are seeing it. come out over time. And so content authoring, to answer your question, is that pillar that is taking a lot of innovation right now.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, maybe for additional context, I think that the move to headless created a bit of a zero-sum game when it came to how different personas like to work. And the way that really fundamentally played out was, the dichotomy between developers and business users, or specifically marketers. And with headless, traditionally, it was just a favorable technology to the developer audience. And marketers who had been used to the kind of the WYSIWYG world with some of the legacy, in many cases felt like they were losing capability and functionality that they were quite attached to in the past. And so with the movement towards visual building, it really does feel like we're bridging that gap. We announced our visual builder yesterday at our ContentCon conference, and I talked to many customers who were thrilled that they can now kind of bridge the IT and marketing departments and kind of a best of both worlds scenario where finally the building and the assembly of great digital experiences can be done in a no-code environment, and it can be done through the entry editor as it's always been done. It's up to the individual and how they like to work. So that's resonating really strongly. And I think you're right. The drag and drop functionality, the user experience, and how that maps to just modern technology and how people are used to not even working but living their life is generally just a really good thing. And there's also something really powerful about being able to see and feel your work, which I don't think we should take for granted. There's a lot of power in that, and especially for marketers who love to create. So we're really excited about that. I think one of the questions that comes to mind is for marketers specifically. I talked about the zero-sum game. Now that that's kind of a level playing field, do you think marketers will feel more empowered in this new world to take more ownership of the content creation process in a headless environment?
100%. And I'm going to take it an additional level, which is it's not only marketers. Like, marketers need to work with their business teams to get the deep nuggets out of, let's say, a new product launch or a new services launch in market. And having tools like visual builders will allow even the business teams to come in and collaborate with marketers without making it still such a handoff between, business to marketing to IT. I think the level of collaboration is going to go up, and that's going to it's going to help CMS become not only the core orchestrator, but become sort of like the universal currency that's driving digital experiences across the business, which is where we've always wanted CMS to be, working back from IT into marketing and now even over the business teams. So much more than that.
Yeah, I love that. And that ties directly to this slide, which is really, what should folks look for when it comes to like critical factors to consider. And I think it's really three things. We've talked about empowerment of non-technical users. You're right. It's not just marketers. Enhanced collaboration, 100%. There's going to be much better. It opens up the ability to collaborate in a way that hasn't really been there before. And then just this concept of future proofing and flexibility and agility. That's the number one thing that headless unlocked. Now it unlocks it in a way that is kind of cross-functional in nature, which is, I think, a really powerful thing. It also tees up for me a really interesting double click on personalization, because you teed that up earlier, Chuck. I'm wondering if there's an interesting path for us to go in terms of the history and where we're at today with personalization.
It's so interesting with personalization. I have the data and I have the research, but I'd love to hear from you guys. What are you seeing in terms of personalization and market? I know you guys obviously have a new product. Personalization is a hot topic a lot of customers call into Forrester trying to figure out how to navigate it, especially around content
Yeah.
personalization. So tell us a little bit about where you guys are.
It's been the number one thing top of mind for our customers for a couple of years now. And that's why we've been investing in it. But I think we wanted to be really grounded in why wasn't it working in the past? And we kind of landed on three main pillars of what was broken about personalization. And the first main pillar was just heavy reliance on IT and kind of fragmented workflows and production process, having to work in multiple tools, not having personalization native to the authoring experience. It was simply too fragmented for teams to feel like they could effectively operationalize it. The second pillar is, even if you were able to do that, the number of permutations of content needed to accomplish what you need to accomplish, for even, I'll just give you an example here, even just personalizing your homepage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a real life example of me from a previous role where I had 4 geos I was operating in. We were going after 6 different industries, 4 different personas, 3 different customer segments. I would have needed 288 variations of my content to effectively personalize my homepage. And that math it's pretty mind-boggling. And so there's no marketing teams in our industry that are resourced to do that work. And so it's just been really hard to generate the content. And of course, AI has been around now for, I think, a little over 18 months in terms of ChatGPT. It's good, but it's kind of tone deaf when it comes to knowing your business and your brand. And so that's really been a blocker for teams that we see. And then the last one is, how do you scale it? How do you operationalize it and make it repeatable so that you don't need to hire a bunch of people to architect personalization? The system is kind of autonomous in terms of driving that forward. So those are the top 3 that I would see. I think my question back to you would be, if you solve for these 3 things and you do it natively in the CMS, what value do you see for customers in making that a reality?
I mean, you have the ability to reach customers in multiple moments of need or anticipation, right? That's the thing that's interesting about personalization. It's not just personalizing by segments. Earlier, I talked about individual one-to-one experiences. Then there are things like you have to think about different layers of it, which is this pre-purchase if you're in a retail scenario, post-purchase? Is this an anticipatory experience that you're trying to serve up? What is the level of intelligence? So having personalization embedded in a CMS allows you to connect data to the content, which helps. But beyond that, you still need some amount of intelligence around customer information, around customer data, CDP, CRM, what have you, to drive ideas on what the next best actions on what facet of personalization you're going after is. And that's what makes it so super tricky for so many businesses. Because we've all been victims of this, where you purchase a pair of running shoes and then the company is still marketing the same running shoes or running shoes to you. Like, if I'm your customer, you should know at what point to cut that on and off. And that's a little bit about the data being in different silos. And to your point, different geos. That's a very common conversation we have with Forrester clients, where they're trying to solve personalization and they realize that their content and their content's fragmented, data is in different geos, and to stitch that whole story together to deliver that unified, seamless experience is challenging. The software system that is in the sort of the crosshairs of the whole story here is the CMS. And that's actually what's funny about that. That's not me saying it. That's what when we went through the wave references, that's what they told me, which is like, the only system that's going to do this is the CMS. So please help us as sort of like software and services to get this up to the next level.
Right. Yeah. There's a plea almost. So you mentioned earlier that data is the foundation of like the value you can get from AI, is the ability to take large amounts of data and extract meaningful insights. Related to this topic of personalization and the evolution of the CMS, I'd love to double click on your thoughts on generative AI specifically, and how does it fit into the overall equation going forward?
Yeah. One of the things that I like to talk about that's related to generative AI in content management is we've been very focused on operational efficiencies. And if you even look at this slide here, we've gone from manual copy generation to creating, copy using generative AI. We can manually translate product information and content. I spoke to a shoe manufacturer out of Latin America, and they told me about the different geos they're able to go to now because they're able to translate their product information into so many different languages so much faster. So there's definitely a lot of business value add there. But whether we're reducing ideation cycles, whether we're looking at making data more consistent and fill in the gaps in data or any sort of content even, those stories still exist, and many businesses are now in 2024 reaping business benefits as a result of that. The focus in that whole story that I just described, though, is operational efficiencies. We're trying to see how we can cut down on whether it's copywriting or quality improvement even, right? But when you start looking at the other lens of it, which is really what generative AI was meant to do, not so much operational efficiencies, it's business value generation. And so now, as you think about that, maybe this Gen AI piece will actually help us, be the red thread that will stitch the whole story in the conversation we've been having together this morning, which is when you think about generative AI's role in digital experiences, it needs to help us generate new business value. It needs to be able to tell me, hey, where are there customer segments that you should be targeting that you are completely blanking out on? You don't even have them captured. Hey, by the way, these are the content items and content pieces that are not performing. Or hey, when somebody's on your PDP on this product detail page that has been created using, maybe your PIM and your DAM and your CMS, this is the part where we're seeing most people drop off or trail off. Maybe you should do something around the language. So really adding business value. And that goes back to the personalization story, as you can probably imagine, where the more personalized experiences we're able to deliver, the more value we'll be able to generate. But then it goes further back to things like that Gen AI native studio and the visual builder and the next gen engagement tools, where some of these core capabilities we're putting into place with the CMS are actually going to be the firepower that help us fire through those LLMs in the coming years. And I think we're basically on a journey that we're going through pretty quickly, almost hockey sticking it, because I can tell you this much: when I evaluated CMSs last year, almost all CMSs I evaluated had some level of generative AI copy generation. That wasn't even a thing. Everybody had it.
Yeah.
Now the question is, what kind of business value can these CMSs add? And I think that's where it's going to get real fun. What are you guys seeing?
Yeah, actually, I love that you use the word journey, because I really do think it is a journey that every customer is currently evaluating what their own personal journey is going to look like as they adopt AI and as they ideate on use cases for AI. We're seeing, I think the best word to describe it would be a spectrum. We're seeing a spectrum of use cases, and that spectrum is from more internal, you mentioned operational efficiency, to more external value creation. And arguably value creation can come from internal as well. But I think this spectrum is fascinating because what's emerging are patterns of use cases that customers are adopting. And what we're seeing is a tendency to start on the left-hand side of this spectrum and move to the right. Even though the ideation starts usually on the right and moves more to the left, because the initial gut, the driver is how can we scale content and experiences for our audience. But to your point around authenticity and the stakes being high, we end up seeing customers start a little earlier in the spectrum. So more internal focused, things like governance and collaboration. How do you automate and scale those things? Things like content taxonomies, super interesting use cases that are emerging with internal and internal plus some external collaboration and ideation. Then, as there's more maturity and comfortability at the team level and at the organization level, especially around governance and compliance and legals usually involved, then you start to see more external facing, where people are doing translations. They're powering the personalization engine with brand aware AI that knows your business and knows your brand. And that's actually one really important point is, in order for AI to drive value and to be pragmatic, it needs to know your business. It needs to understand your brand. And we think brand is at the heart of that. And so we say that AI has to be brand aware in order to move from the left to right side of this spectrum, because then you can create the 288 variations of content with confidence that it is going to speak to the audience in the way that if you did have an army of marketers, they would write the content in that way. I think that's going to be the difference maker when it comes to authenticity. So, and definitely a spectrum. We're documenting a bunch of use cases. We're going to try to produce content and share it out so folks can see all the great ideation that's happening. And I would encourage everybody on this call to have meetings with their teams where the goal is specifically to ideate on how to lean into AI to help on both ends of this spectrum in terms of operational efficiency and value creation externally. Awesome. So, Chuck, this has been great. I love that we've been able to share with the audience kind of state of the union. What are the trends that are top of mind? How can folks make it actionable today? I think it wouldn't be a typical conversation between you and I if we don't look forward to the future a little bit. So what I was thinking is, why don't we look ahead a little bit? And I'd love to hear your perspective on the direction that you're seeing in the CMS space and kind of teeing up some visionary stuff for the crowd here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we think about content management going forward, it's going to be very centered around the audiences we are speaking to, how we are speaking to them, what level of generative AI is driving or LLMs are driving that. And I'm looking at the question that's actually in the chat as well. And honestly, I think, as we look to the future, 5, 7, 10 years from now, I can see a world where the storyline is a lot less about creating individual pieces of content and storing them, and a lot more about tagging taxonomy LLMs that are trained on your vertical, that are able to create and generate content, service your customers, and actually start, demonstrate market value for you, especially as, computing power continues to increase in scale. We'll have machines that can respond to API calls and create dynamic experiences, as I like to call them. So I think there's a lot of opportunity going forward. And in fact, our data also shows, which I didn't even touch on, but we did a web content management forecast a couple of, I think maybe 6 months ago. And the amount of investment and the trajectory and forecast for content management systems is just crazy, because marketers, digital experience professionals, even business teams know that, our research also shows that 95% of US adults have a smartphone in front of them. It's like an always on opportunity. And the way to reach them is through curated, contextualized, personalized, and maybe someday individualized digital experiences, right? And to get there, the system that's at the crosshairs, as I keep saying, is the CMS that's delivering that experience.
Yeah, I love that. Actually, I think we're thinking very similarly here, which is great. We have this vision of a world where we can't help but use this term, and it's probably not the right term, but I'm going to say it. A self-driving CMS, in the sense of an autonomous decision-making engine that can optimize. You give the system a goal for, let's just say, conversion rates, for example, and and with the right insights and the right AI engine behind it, the system can optimize and test and keep iterating from a content perspective until it hits the goal. And that fundamentally is a game changer for what it means to do not just content management, but dynamic real-time personalization even at the one-to-one level. Of course, there's requirements from a CDP perspective that layer on there. To me, the real wild card though is what happens in a world where I'll just throw out a number, 80% of the traffic that your site is getting are actually AI agents that are working on behalf of humans, and only 20% are actually humans doing that last mile. What does that world look like from a content management perspective? What, SEO is going to evolve into LLMO, and how do CMS vendors they have to build for that future? And I think the key question that we should be asking ourselves is, will the legacy CMS players be in a position to build for that future? I don't know, but I know that we are, because it is going to happen at some point. I would say it's even less of a wild card. For everybody saw the Salesforce announcements last week, but the dynamics are going to change dramatically, and there's major implications for your first point in this call, which was around brand awareness and visibility as the key driver for purchase. I believe that's true across B2B and B2C, and going to be at the core of where the future of CMS goes.
I agree 100%. I'm going to add on to what you're saying. Some of the other research I did this year around outcomes-based digital experiences and third-party experiences, we spend so much time and money bringing people to our experiences. But to your point, as these agents come about, and maybe even more so when we type in a prompt and a call goes out via API, is your digital experience ready to answer that call based upon your tagging, your taxonomy, and where your products and or services are ready to be surfaced? I think those are the questions that CMSs will have to answer and prove value on. The crux of it and the underlying core will be these content-centric LLMs that are very purposely fine-tuned for your verticals that give you that upper edge to help you perform in market too. But yes, you're absolutely right. I think that's where we're headed. I think it's going to be a lot more third-party experiences, less around, will the brand experiences exist? Yes, they still will. However, I think we're going to see a lot more growth come through this third-party version of it.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Awesome. I see a question in the chat here around brand relevancy tied to the AI agents comment. So since I just made that, I'll address that. I think, and the question's from Anna Leon. The first question is, what is brand? And I would argue that brand it's a couple things. It's what people say about you when you're not in the room. It's your reputation. And it's the connection between a company and its customers. And that connection is created through many different touch points. It could be your website, it could be events, it could be advertising, it could be your product, it could be humans, reaching out and talking to people. It's all brand, in my opinion. And so in this new world where agents will be working on behalf of humans to go gather information and create, let's use an example of B2C, create me a short list of 55 to 65 inch flat screen TVs for me to buy my mom for Christmas. Brand relevancy to me is two things. Number one, are you going to show up in that short list? And number two, when the human reads that short list, are they going to recognize your brand? And are you going to rise to the top because you have that connection with your audience? And I think we're going to have to optimize for both. And that's the challenge. I don't know. Chuck, what do you think?
No, I agree. It's a little bit,
Yeah.
brand relevancy, brand experience is what customers remember about your brand, the feeling that your brand leaves them with. And I think to evoke those emotions, we're gonna have to think a lot through what digital experiences look like and how they manifest on, different touch points. The good news is we only said mobile desktop right now, but there will be a world of VR and AR that will come about in some amount of time. And so what is the emotion that you leave your customers with as they experience your brand? And to that point, when it comes to be relevancy, will they recognize and remember that when they look at your brands on that short list?
Yeah, so true. Okay, we had another question here around where to start with personalization. Like, what are the first steps you should take? I could start. I think it is potentially overwhelming to think about where to start. I can tell you where I personally have started and plan to start, even here at Contentstack, is with the homepage. That first impression is everything. And I think if you can deliver more authentic experiences with that first touch point, you then have a chance to drive much higher conversion. And so thinking through segmentation of your audience as a way to build and deliver dynamic first touch experiences on your homepage would be a great place to start for any company that is looking to drive significant amounts of traffic to that page, both paid, earned, and owned. What do you think, Chuck?
No, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, personalization has got to do with, as I mentioned, content, data, figuring out silos in your org, stitching the story together. I think brands should be also thinking about what level of personalization their end customers are comfortable with. Whether it's in a B2B scenario and a B2C scenario, personalization looks very different. So in B2B, where we have buying groups and honestly, teams would prefer to stay anonymous, personalization takes on a different look and feel rather than when it does for a retail customer, where you're trying to do, a post-purchase, add-on sale. So I think there's different variations of personalization, and I think brands need to first assess what level of personalization they're comfortable with, what can their content and data support. And then to your point, I think they need to start engaging and testing the waters on how it can start adding business value. Because I can tell you this much, on the other side, our consumer pulse survey data shows that customers are absolutely looking for different levels of personalization in different parts of their customer journey with a brand.
Yeah.
So that number is steadily going up year over year.
Yeah. That's a really good point. And the other data point that I'd layer on top of that is that the research does show, and I can only speak for myself, but I personally agree, people are more willing to give more of their personal information to a brand in exchange for a higher value, more personalized experience. The problem is we haven't been able to deliver on that more personalized experience yet, but the willingness is there on the customer side.
Absolutely.
Why don't we go back to Alex? Alex, do we have any other questions that Chuck and I could potentially answer?
Yeah, this was a wonderful discussion. I'm checking out the questions in the Q&A, and I appreciate you both answering those as they came in. Let's take a look. Could you elaborate on how the current economic climate is impacting organizations' investments in CMS and personalization technologies?
I can take that first, maybe, Gurdeep, because I can maybe give a wider market view.
Yeah.
So what we've seen 23, let's say back half of 23 and into 24 is a couple of things. It's a tougher economic climate naturally. There is more focus on proving the value of any major investments. We're seeing less multi-year digital transformations and more point solution implementations, which is would like to implement a digital asset management system or a CMS or a e-com, or they're trying to do pieces of the larger transformation individually to prove value. That's one thing. The other thing that's really come into, a lot of our conversations with Forrester's clients is, well, we need you to really double down on generative AI. We need you to tell us where Gen AI is adding business value. Every application that they're looking at sort of prove how Gen AI can definitely do operational efficiencies, but where is it going to add more top line growth for our business? That's become a sort of a pressure point for many, many businesses and business leaders that are talking to us. And so those sort of economic climate changes, behavior changes in leadership levels are pushing digital and technology leaders to really think through, well, what is the CMS that I have doing the best it can? What should I be thinking around personalization? How can I service my customers better? And so we're seeing sort of the rise and the push of more DX tech that is going to drive value. I've seen folks that are on, one pure headless solution go to another pure headless solution because it wasn't meeting their needs. So like people are willing to make the hop, but the focus has really started to come about, especially in the last several months of 24, around how Gen AI powered CMSs essentially can add business value. That's what we're seeing. Higher level.
Yeah, okay, that's really good context at a wider level. I think the only thing I would add to that is we are seeing, this is a replacement business. This is about modernization, and we are seeing spend shift from kind of legacy, static, pervasive digital experiences onto modern, and so while it's not necessarily incremental spend for the customer, it does benefit, some of the modern CMS vendors. So we are seeing that in our pipeline. It's a lot of shifting off of legacy. But to your point, Chuck, I agree. There's not as many large-scale digital transformations, and if they are, the sales cycles are extending. And I think that's fine. We're kind of used to it at this point. I think the key will be when we start to see indicators of that, of those cycles shrinking back to what they used to be, which was more in the, the 6 to 9 month range.
And I think that's going to happen here pretty soon as Gen AI starts to really take off on business value, Jen. I think it's going to create more of a competitive space with the CMS vendors like yourself.
Yeah.
More importantly, adding more industry vertical-based value to the clients, which will start to shift the story in terms of, do I have the right solution? Oh my gosh, I should probably move faster because I will impact my business today rather than tomorrow.
Right. That's right. Yeah, it'll be the catalyst that accelerates things. I totally agree.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much. It seems like that is all the questions that we have for today. Any other closing thoughts before we wrap up?
This was a pleasure, Chuck. It's always great hearing your insight. I know you're publishing a ton of research. Folks should definitely check that out. And let's do this again.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, folks.
All right. Thank you both
Amazing.
so much.
Bye, everybody.
As I mentioned earlier, we'll follow up soon with the recording of today's session. And with that, thanks again. We'll see you all soon.
Thanks, folks.
Bye.